There are enormous amounts of African cosmogonies. These cosmogonies reflect the understanding and priorities of various social groups, tribes, or races. Some of these tribal myths bear the marks of British colonialism by eliminating gods and mutating their mythology to reflect a monotheistic approach to cosmogony. We also see many fertility gods as high gods in African cosmogonies. And of course, we see the types of myths that we have been studying, those that incorporate animals and cosmic events and creation. We see this in Cain Orders the World, the second piece that we'll be reading in the African cosmogonies. We also see emergence creations from the Congo region, primeval water myths, as well from the Yoruba tribe. So again, we see many of these non-creation types emerge from tribes in and around Africa. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the differing myths that we're not going to be reading, so you'll kind of get an overview of the difference, the vast difference in the myths of ancient Africans. So the Yoruba mythology is pretty interesting. According to Yoruba mythology, the first Yoruba kings were the offspring of the creator Oduduwa. The Yoruba king's crown identifies the status of its wearer and gives the king the power to interact with the spirit world in order to benefit his people. A veil, a large face, a group of birds are all images that commonly appear on a Yoruba king's crowns. Long ago, Olorun, a sky god, lowered a great chain from the heavens to the ancient waters. Down this chain climbed Oduduwa, Olorun's son. Oduduwa brought with him a handful of dirt, a special five-toed chicken, and a palm nut. He threw the dirt upon the ancient waters and set the chicken on the dirt, and the chicken busily scratched and scattered the dirt until he formed the first dry earth. In the center of this new world, Oduduwa created the magnificent Ife kingdom. He planted the palm nut, which grew into a proud tree with 16 branches, symbolizing the 16 sons and grandsons of Oduduwa. Oduduwa became the first ruler of the kingdom and the father of all Yoruba peoples. Over time, he crowned his 16 sons and grandsons and set them off to establish their own great Yoruba kingdoms across Africa. As descendants of the sky god, the first Yoruba rulers and their direct descendants were divine kings, only they could wear the special veiled crowns that symbolized their sacred power. The Yoruba were a really interesting group of people. And they were one of the very first tribes to set out to spread their message or to spread the Yoruba traditions. Next, I'd like to look at the Efik, and they're a Nigerian tribe. Their god's name is Abassi with an A-B-A-S-S-I, and many times in African mythology, because of the close proximity of many of these tribes, you'll find simply a name change or a very slight change in the name between mythologies. So the Efik Nigerian tribe's myth involves a creator named Abassi. And Abassi created two humans and then decided to not allow them to live on Earth. His wife, Atai, persuaded him to let them live on Earth. In order to control the humans, Abassi insisted that they eat all their meals with him, thereby keeping them from growing or hunting food. He also forbade them from procreating. Soon, though, the woman began growing food in the earth, and they stopped showing up to eat with Abassi. Then the man joined his wife in the fields, and before long there were children also. Abassi, of course, blamed his wife for the way things had turned out, but she told him she would handle it. She sent to earth death and discord to keep the people in their place. And this creation myth kind of sets in place that same idea of Adam and Eve, and you can kind of see colonial traditions seeping into some of these tribes and their mythology. The next tribe that I want to look at is the Ikoi. And the Ikoi are a tribe in southern part of Nigeria. And their myth is very similar, including the gods' names. So the god in the Ikoi myth is named Abasi as well, but with an O. So in the beginning, there were two gods, Abasi Asal and Abasi Nisi. These two gods created everything together. Abasi also divided to live into the sky, to live in the sky, and Abasi Nisi decided to live on the earth. The God in the sky gives light and moisture, but also brings drought and storms. The God of the earth nurtures and takes the people back to him when they die. One day long ago, Abasi also saw a man and a woman and placed them upon the earth. They knew nothing, so Abasi Nisi taught them about planting and hunting and to get food. Now, unfortunately, their mythology doesn't tell us where they found these two humans or really go into depth, but you can see the similarities in this Akoi myth and the Efik myth from the Nigerian area. The next myth that I want to look at comes from Ethiopia, and it's about Wak. And Wak was the creator god who lived in the clouds, and he kept the vault of the heavens at a distance from the earth and covered it with stars. He was a benefactor and did not punish. When the earth was flat, Wak asked man to make his own coffin, and when man did this, Wak shut him up in it and pushed him into the ground. For 7 years he made fire rain down, and the mountains were formed. Then Wak unearthed the coffin, and man sprang forth alive. Man tired of living alone, so Wak took some of his blood, and after 4 days the blood became a woman, whom then man married. They had 30 children, but the man was ashamed of having so many, so he hid 15 of them. Wak then made those hidden children into animals and demons. So with the Ethiopian myths, we see a separation between the heavens and the earth again, but we also see something interesting, a benevolent God who knows that fire is going to rain down on the earth, and so he closes man up inside of a coffin and pushes him into the earth until this danger is over. And then when the danger is over, he digs the man out and the creation begins. I think this is an interesting look at mythology that we haven't really seen before, this benevolent God that wants to protect humans. The next myth that I want to look at is the Fan myth. And the Fans are a Bantu tribe in Africa. In the beginning, there was nothing but Nizam. This god is really three: Nizam, Mbere, and Nkwa. It was Nizam, that part of the god, that created the universe and the earth and brought life to it. While the three parts of Nizam were admiring his creation, it was decided to create a ruler for the earth. So was created the elephant, the leopard, and the monkey. But it was decided that something better had to be created. Between the three of them, they made new creatures in their image, and they called him Fam, or Power, and told him to rule the earth. Before long, Fam grew arrogant. He mistreated the animals and stopped worshiping Nizam. Nizam, angered, brought forth thunder and lightning and destroyed everything that was, except Fam, who had been promised immortality. Nizam, in his three aspects, decided to renew the earth and try again. He applied a new layer of earth to the planet and grew a tree upon it. The tree dropped seeds, which grew into more trees. Leaves that dropped from them into the water became fish, and those that dropped on land became animals. The old parched earth still lies below the new one, and if one digs deep enough, it can be found in the form of coal. Nizam made a new man, one who would know death, and called him Sukume. And Sukume fashioned a woman, Mbongwi, from a tree. These people were made with both Noel, body, and Nasim, soul. Nasim gives life to Noel. When the knoll dies, Nassim lives on. They produce many children and prospered. Now, with the fans, you can definitely see the influence of British colonialism with the body and soul and the separation of the two. Also, a creation that was overturned or, you know, flooded out per se. Um, Nizam covers the earth with a new layer of earth to recreate his planet in a new way. But that's very similar to what floods do, or what floods are meant to do in literature. And that is not to obliterate everything, but to find a new way of life. And as we're leaving the creation myths, it's important for you to understand that humanity sometimes needs to start over. It becomes so corrupt that sometimes they need a new way to look at things. And you can see this in mythology. I next want to look at the Wahangwi myths. Um, so the Mohangwi are Rhodesian peoples from Maori, and they created the first man, Mututsi, who became the moon. Maori gave him a Nagona horn filled with Nagona oil and told him that he would live at the bottom of the waters. Mututsi objected and said he wished to live on the land. Maori reluctantly agreed, but said Mututsi would have to give up immortality if he did. After a while, Mututsi complained of loneliness, so Maori sent him a woman, Masasi, the morning star, to keep him company for 2 years. Each night they slept on opposite sides of the campfire, until one night Mututsi jumped over the flame and touched Masasi with a finger he had moistened with Nagona oil. In the morning, Masasi was huge and soon gave birth to plants and trees, until the whole earth was covered by them. At the end of 2 years, Maori and took Masasi away. Mututsi wept for 8 years, at which time Maori sent him another woman, Morongo, the evening star, saying that she could stay for 2 years. On the first night, Mututsi touched her with his oiled finger, but she said she was different than Masasi, and that they would have to oil their loins and have intercourse. This they did this night, and every night thereafter. Every morning Morongo gave birth to animals of creation. Then she gave birth to human boys and girls, who became full grown that very same evening. Maori voiced his displeasure with the fierce storm and told Mututsi he was hastening his death with all the procreation. Morongo, ever the temptress, instructed Mututsi to build a door to their habitat so that Maori could not see what they were doing. He did this, and again they slept together. Now in the morning, Morongo gave birth to violent animals, snakes, scorpions, lions, etc. One night Morongo told Mututsi to have intercourse with his daughters, which he did, thereby fathering the human race. Well, in this myth, we have a whole human race fathered from incest. But it's interesting that the mother creates the animals and that the daughters create the humans. I think that's an interesting aspect of this myth. I think another interesting aspect of this myth is the fact that Mututsi gets 2 wives. We talk about this a little bit with Adam and the idea of Adam having 2 wives. Here again, we see this. And this myth may or may not be influenced by colonialism. I'm not sure. I don't really see a whole lot of colonialism, but we do see a lot of didactic instructions about things like the oiled finger and the oiled loins. The next myth I want to talk about is of the Shillooks. And the Shillooks are a people of the Nile region. In each region of the world in which the Creator traveled, he created humans from the materials available, making some white, others red or brown, and the Shillook black. He then took a piece of the earth and gave them arms, eyes, etc. This story says much about the values and culture of the Shillooks in distributing their characteristics to man. He chose first to give them the ability to do work through the use of their arms and legs. Then he designates the color of the Shillooks, stating that they are black. meaning that the pigment in their skin can take more sunshine. They were then given the ability to see and taste their food, and finally they were given the ability of speech and hearing, with which to entertain oneself by hearing stories. This shows the value system of work amongst the Shilluk people, that work comes above all else. It also attempts to explain the differences between men of various races by telling of how they came about. The West African creation tale explains how two spirit people were accidentally sent down to earth by a sky god. Lonely, the people decided to create children from clay, but they feel they must hide them when the sky god comes down because they are hidden in a fire. The children soon turn to various shades based on how long they had been exposed to the heat. Over time, these, much like that of the Shilluk people, the story serves a twofold purpose. It explains both the creation of man as well as it accounts for the differences among them. This tale also shows the West African values and these differences because they feel that all men are created equal and should be treated as such. This is a really interesting myth, and we'll see more about the color changes when we get to Native American myths. We're starting to see different races of people mingle because of the spread of humanity. And it's important to explain the differences in people. I think that the Native Americans and Africans do it very well. They are able to explain these differences based on almost scientific evidence. That these people were exposed to the fire or the sun longer than other people, and that explains the change in the color of their skin. And as we all know, the melanin in your skin is what is responsible for your coloring. So I really like that myth a lot. The Abluyi are another tribe of Africa. And they believe that God created man so that the sun would have someone to shine on. He then created plants and animals to provide them with food and gave man woman so that he would have someone with whom to talk. This shows that the Abluyi they're a very patriarchal society. They're very male-centered. The sun was created to shine on the male. They believe, in essence, that the world was created exclusively to suit the needs of men, with little regard for creatures or women or anyone else. So it's kind of interesting to see the differences in the tribal views. The Zimbabwe myth is an interesting one. Modimo was the creator of the Zimbabwe tribe, and he distributed good things. He appeared in the east and belonged to the element water. At the same time, he was the destroyer, a terrifying creature responsible for drought, hail, cyclones, and earthquakes. When these things happened, he appeared in the west and was part of the element fire. Modimo was also sky and light, earth and root. He was a unique and singular God. He had no ancestors, no past, and no future. He pervaded the whole of creation, and his name was taboo and could be spoken only by priests and seers in his culture. Now, this is very interesting because this is very similar to the Old Testament ideas about Yahweh. Not only is he the creator, but he is the punisher. I see a lot of similarities in this and early Christian mythology, Old Testament mythology. I think that these are very easy to see good and evil depictions. And the last myth that I want to talk about is the Zulu myth. And it's the ancient one, who is also known as Akunlaku. Unkalunkan? No, wait. Unkaluka. There we go. The Zulu creator. He came from the reeds. And from them he brought forth the people and the cattle. He created everything that is, mountains, streams, snakes, etc. And he taught the Zulu people how to hunt, how to make fire, and how to grow food. He is considered to be the first man and is in everything that was created. So this is an interesting one. He is the creator of all in the Zulu mythology. He takes care of everything. It's very similar to the Zimbabwe mythology. But it's all male-centered again as well. All of these mythologies combine to create something really interesting across Africa, and that is a pantheon of gods, different creator gods that are different for almost every tribe. I think Africa is one of the most extensive planes of mythology that we have. So there are actually two varying stories of the Bumba creation story. They vary slightly, but the variation is largely based in the impact of the way these tribes view human life in association with other species. Both of these myths are Bashongo or Bantu myths, and as you can see from this map, the Bantu tribe covers most of southern Africa. So the Bashongo are a Bantu tribe of Central Africa, and this first idea comes from the Central Africa area. And in the beginning there was only darkness, according to them, water, and the great god Bumba. One day Bumba, in pain from a stomach ache, vomited up the sun. The sun dried up some of the water, leaving land. Still in pain, Bumba vomited up the moon, the stars, and then some animals, the leopard, the crocodile, the turtle, and finally some men, one of whom, Yokilima, was white like Bumba. So this is the first story, and it's from the central Bantu region of Africa. Now the second Bashongo myth is from the Lunda cluster, and it tells a slightly different version. For them, their creator was a man named Bumba, who created both the sun and moon along with the various creatures. Before the man came. In the explanation of how each creature was created, one can see the deep relationship between the Bashongo and nature, because they were the last to be created rather than the first. They are no more important than any other living organism. There is a oneness that exists in their society, for they all work for the betterment of the world. We're focusing on this version because it's a creation from, well, I guess secretions. Bumba's beginnings really come from primeval waters, as we see. There was only darkness and water in the beginning of the Bumba myth. Sometimes Bumba is depicted as a praying mantis. But again, with Bumba's myth, like the myths of Tiamat and others that we have read, we see this stomach problem, and whatever's in the stomach, the children that are in the stomach are causing problems for the god. They're being rowdy, they're acting up, they're being loud, whatever it may be. These tummy troubles tend to come out. And here we see a secretion vomiting of Bumba, who pukes everything into existence. In this myth, again, we have a female troublemaker. And we see a brotherhood between beast and man, which is very common in the more tribal communities that we're going to encounter. You'll notice it a lot in African mythology, in South American mythology, and in Native American mythology. So in the story of Bumba, Bumba begins to vomit things up. First he vomits up the sun, which dries out the water. Then he vomits up the moon and stars. Then he vomits up some very specific living creatures. He vomits up a leopard named Koi Bumba, a crested eagle named Pongo Bumba, a crocodile named Gonda Bumba, one little fish named Yo, a tortoise called Old Kono Bumba, Cece the lightning, a white heron named Bumba, one beetle, a goat named Buddy, many men, and then one white man named Lokayima. These are very specific things to vomit up. And then we see serpents that make grasshoppers and iguanas that make the creatures without horns. It's pretty interesting, interesting tale. Bumba also has three sons. Naoni Nanga, who creates the white ants, and he dies doing it, and the ants build a colony in the depths of the earth to honor him. Then we see Chonganda. He creates the living plants, the flowers, and the trees, and Chidibumba, who creates the kite. Lightning in this tale is the troublemaker, which is associated with femininity, and Bumba chases her into the sky. And this shows a little bit about how mankind can trap lightning from the strikes. And in Africa, this is very important because there's not a lot of trees. There's not a lot of kindling to burn. So a lot of early tribes relied on these lightning strikes to bring fire. And Bumba is the creator of all of this. This is a very beautiful tale. Here are a couple of modern art depictions of Bumba that I think are just great. I love these art pieces that show the mythology and depict the mythology in an easy to understand form. I really like the graphic depiction on the right that shows Bumba kind of vomiting up the universe. I think that's a really neat aspect of Bumba. I'll be posting a modern interpretation of Bumba vomiting the world. This was an art piece that was done by a student. It was a student project. I think it's a beautiful project, and it depicts the myth of Bumba very well. So look for that video after you watch your lecture. So the second myth you're going to look at is Cain orders the world, and Cain is a very interesting tale. Cain is a trickster god, and tricksters are generally shapeshifters. Tricksters walk a fine line between good and evil. They're generally crafty, but they always achieve their goals. And trickster gods are generally blessed with the gift of foresight. In Cain's mythology, we see this idea of vengeful gods. There's a definite hierarchy that emerges. Kogaz is like the other half of Cain, that yin and yang balancing force, but it's also a father-son relationship that we see in many mythologies. Cain punishes everything that disobeys. So let's look at Cain for a minute. The story actually begins with a daughter getting angry at her father and running away with snakes. The snakes were actually men, of course. She's required that she must eat no evil thing. We usually see the woman depicted as eating evil things. But because she is the daughter of a god, she is restricted from eating evil things or eating with men without a chaperone. Cain can see the future like Prometheus, and he saw a great flood coming, so he was worried that his daughter might be in danger, and he wants his daughter back. So he sends his son Kogaz. He sends him with his magical tooth that gives Kogaz strength, and the snakes try to keep her, but Kogaz overpowers those snakes. The snakes sense the flood too, and they build a tower to avoid the flood. Cain sees this and turns them into people. He hits them on the back with a stick, and they turn human, and the snake skin remains. Humans are created from snakes in this myth. This is interesting because in one of the Native American myths, you'll also see people getting hit on the back and changing into other things. Then Cain sends Kogaz to cut sticks. The sticks are for bows for battle, and Kogaz encounters some baboons. The baboons thought that the bows were to kill them, so they kill Kogaz. They tie him up in the top of a tree and dance around his corpse. The baboon's song mocks Cain and asserts that he was asleep while his son was murdered. Cain awakes and asks Cody for his charms. He sees Kogaz's murder. Cain goes to the baboons. He finds a bag of pegs while the baboons are singing. He drove one peg in each baboon's back and gave it a crack. Could this be related maybe to that little nursery rhyme about stepping on a crack and breaking your mother's back? Many ideas like this come from ancient mythology. Cain curses them with a crooked tail, and they're forever meant to hang from trees. He then takes Kogaz down and feeds him a kana, which brings him back to life again. Cain then finds an eagle eating honey. And Cain says, "Give me some of that honey." And the eagle was like, "Hold on, dude, it's not your turn yet." And the eagle told Cain to, take a break. So Cain remembers that he has his charms, or his little teeth, and telepathically asks Kogaz for advice. Kogaz advises him to make water run down the mountain, and this will free him. Cain goes through the earth 3 times, and then came up next to the eagle in the shape of a bull. Remember, he's a shapeshifter. Cain made it hail, which knocked the eagle out, and then he killed him. He takes the honey home to his son and tells Kogaz he killed the eagle for him. Cain meets a meat-eating lady dancing around a big fire. She would catch men and throw them in the fire. And Cain pulls up a seat and starts roasting some roots. She pitches Cain in the fire, but he jumps right through it. She tries again, and he says, "Wait a bit until I have finished eating my roots, and I'll show you what I am." And instead of, showing the woman what he is, of course he throws her into the fire. This idea of jumping over the fire is something that we see in Native American mythology as well. Cain goes back to the mountains after this for some more honey, which he left where he killed the eagle. He meets this guy named Cusi on the river, and Cusi is trapped in the river. Something has a hold of his foot. Cain tries to help Cusi, and he reaches down into the water to loose the man's leg. But as soon as he reaches down, whatever has a hold of him grabs Cain's leg. And the man ran away, saying, "Now you'll be held there until the winter." So the man steals Cain's honey, throws away his sticks. But Cain remembers somehow that he has his charms, and he consults his son Kogaz. He tears off a piece of his shirt, which the thing grabs, allowing him to get away. Then he kills Cusi and takes back all of his honey for Kogaz and his sticks. And then finally in the myth we see that the thorns were people. They were dwarfs called Cain. They were fighting, and Cain tried to separate them. They killed Cain, but then after time put his bones back together. Cain's bones stumble home where Kogaz has healed them, and Kogaz told him how to rid the world of these little dwarfs. Cain kills some and drives the rest into the mountains. And this is the end of Cain's myth. Cain's myth is a rather odd and interesting one. But it's the story of a vengeful God. It's the story of a punishment for your actions. Although, as we know, the gods don't always set the best example by killing everything. But this is how ancient writing was defined. And I think these myths are really interesting. I hope you've enjoyed looking at African cosmogonies, and if you have any questions, as always, post them in your journals or your discussions, and we'll try to, flesh those out. Your classmates can help if they have ideas about it too. Thank you.